My dreams were shattered by the hands of abuse, leaving me feeling like a forgotten relic of my former self. But I wasn't defeated. I wasn't silenced. While the darkness tried to consume me, I clung to the flicker of hope within my heart, determined to reclaim my spirit and rediscover my dreams, dreams that were waiting to be reborn. This is how I found my voice again and transformed my pain into a canvas of resilience. I spent years hiding my art, afraid to let the world see my scars. But through the brushstrokes of my journey, I learned that healing is possible, and that our stories have the power to inspire others. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Let's connect in this moment. And if my journey resonates with you, consider subscribing. Your support fuels my mission to share hope. Now, let's begin. I am Clara. I live in a small town where everyone knows each other. I am a grandmother. My days are filled with gardening and caring for my grandkids. I love planting flowers and vegetables. It brings me joy and peace. I spend hours in my garden, watching things grow. It is my little paradise. People see me as a kind and cheerful woman. I smile and laugh with my neighbors. I bake cookies and share them with my family. I tell stories to my grandkids. They look up to me, and I am proud of that. But behind my smiles, there is a shadow. I have a dark past that I keep hidden. I have dreams that were crushed a long time ago. I want to share my story. It is not easy, but I feel it is time. I want to show others that they can rise from their pain. I have lived through difficult times, and I still stand. I want to inspire hope. I want others to know that they can heal too. When I think of my past, it feels like a heavy weight. I remember my childhood filled with colors and dreams. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to paint the world as I saw it. My parents supported me. They encouraged my creativity. I loved to draw and paint. I felt free when I held a brush in my hand. I had my first love, Michael. He was a sweet boy who understood me. He saw my talent and made me believe in myself. We would sit together and draw for hours. But life changed, and so did my dreams. The happiness I had slowly vanished. My father lost his job. It was a hard time for our family. We struggled to make ends meet. Then, my uncle moved in with us. He seemed charming at first. He was funny and lively. I thought he would bring joy. I did not know he hid a dark side. I was just a child, and I trusted him. Things changed quickly. My uncle began to act differently. I felt uncomfortable around him. He would say nice things to me, but his looks made me uneasy. I was confused. I did not understand what was happening. I felt trapped in my own home. The abuse began, and my dreams shattered. I learned to stay quiet. I felt shame and fear. I wanted to tell someone, but I did not know how. I kept my art hidden. I would draw in secret, trying to escape my reality. My best friend, Lily, sensed something was wrong. She would ask me if I was okay. I would smile and say yes. I didn't want to burden her with my pain. As the years passed, my dreams faded. I felt lost and voiceless. My uncle's actions left scars on my soul. I thought I would never be free. I tried to hold on to my art, but it became harder. I felt like a bird with broken wings. I wanted to fly, but I could not. The turning point came when my uncle crossed a line. I reached my breaking point. I could no longer bear the silence. I was scared, but I knew I had to act. I thought about escaping, but fear held me back. I felt trapped in a cage, and I needed to find a way out. One day, I decided to confront him. I was shaking with fear, but I had to stand up for myself. I told him to stop. I was tired of living in his shadow. He laughed at me, but I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. I knew I had to be strong. The next few days were a blur. I felt a mix of fear and courage. Then, I found a trusted teacher at school. I decided to share my story with her. It was scary to speak up, but I wanted to be free. I wanted my voice back. When I told her, she listened with kindness. At first, she seemed shocked. But then she believed me. She helped me understand that I was not alone. It was a relief to share my burden. The road ahead was still difficult, but I felt a spark of hope. Reporting my uncle was hard. It took a toll on me. I felt guilt and fear. I worried about what would happen next. But I knew I had to take this step. I wanted justice, but it was complicated. I felt a mix of emotions. I wanted to be free, but I also feared the consequences. After the abuse was exposed, I began a new journey. I started therapy and joined support groups. It was hard to face my past, but I was determined. I wanted to heal. I wanted to find my way back to my art. I was ready to reclaim my identity. Through therapy, I learned to express my feelings. I began to paint again. It felt good to create. I met a mentor in the art community who saw my potential. She encouraged me to believe in myself again. Slowly, I started to rebuild my dreams. I embraced my passion for art. I created pieces that reflected my journey. I held my first art exhibit. It was emotional to share my work. I felt proud and scared at the same time. I found a supportive community. They helped me thrive and grow. I began to discover myself again. I felt empowered as I painted my truth. I wanted to inspire others who had suffered like me. I knew I could help them find their voice. I wanted to show them that dreams can still come true, no matter the past. Now, I stand here as a grandmother. I care for my grandkids and teach them the power of dreams. I want them to know that they can overcome anything. My journey has not been easy, but I am proud of who I am. I am Clara, and this is just the beginning of my story. I remember my childhood with a mix of joy and sadness. It was a time when dreams filled my heart. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to paint beautiful pictures that told stories. My parents always supported my dreams. They believed in me. Their encouragement made me feel special. My father worked hard. He was a caring man. He took me to art classes on weekends. We would drive to the city, where I could learn from talented teachers. I loved those days. I would come home full of ideas and excitement. I wanted to fill the world with my colors. My mother was my biggest fan. She decorated our home with my drawings. She would say that my art made our house a home. I felt proud when she displayed my work. It gave me confidence. I wanted to create more. I wanted to show everyone what I could do. In those early years, I found joy in small things. I loved to sit by the window and draw the flowers in our garden. I would spend hours sketching their shapes and colors. Nature inspired me. I felt a connection to the world through my art. I thought nothing could stop me from following my dreams. Then, there was Michael. He was my first love. He lived down the street. We met in art class. He had a kind smile and a gentle spirit. He saw my talent and cheered me on. We spent afternoons drawing together in the park. We shared our dreams and talked about our futures. With him, I felt alive and hopeful. Michael encouraged me to enter art competitions. He believed I could win. I remember my heart racing when I submitted my first piece. It was a painting of a sunset over the ocean. The colors were bright and full of life. I felt proud. It was my chance to shine. But as I grew older, life changed. The happiness I knew began to fade. My father lost his job. Our family faced struggles. The warmth of my childhood turned cold. I could feel the tension in our home. My mother tried to hold everything together, but it was hard. When my uncle moved in, things took a darker turn. I thought he would bring joy, but I was wrong. At first, he seemed friendly. He laughed and told stories. I wished he would make our home feel normal again. But soon, his true nature revealed itself. He started to make me uncomfortable. I remember feeling confused. I wanted to trust him, but something felt off. I found it harder to focus on my art. The joy I once felt began to slip away. I painted less and less. My dreams felt distant, like a mirage that I could not reach. My uncle's behavior changed the way I saw the world. I felt trapped in my own home. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know how. I stopped sharing my artwork with my parents. I hid my paintings, afraid they would see my pain. I wanted to protect them from the truth. As the years passed, my dreams faded into the background. I felt lost, like a ghost in my own life. I stopped believing in myself. I thought I would never be an artist. I felt like I was drowning in silence. My uncle's actions took away my voice and my spirit. I tried to find comfort in my memories of Michael. I thought of the laughter we shared and the dreams we built together. But those memories became bittersweet. They reminded me of what I had lost. I missed the carefree days when I believed in my art. I was still a child, but my heart carried heavy burdens. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. I felt ashamed. I thought no one would believe me. I felt alone, trapped in a world that had become dark and twisted. The vibrant colors of my childhood faded to gray. When I found my courage to confront my uncle, I thought it would change everything. But the fear of his response held me back. I wanted to protect myself, but I was also tired of being afraid. I wanted to break free from the chains that bound me. There were moments when I thought about Michael. I wondered if he would still believe in me. I wished I could tell him what I was going through. But fear kept me silent. I didn't want to drag him into my nightmare. I wanted to shield him from my pain. As I continued to hide my art, I also hid my dreams. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage. I longed to fly, but I was too scared to spread my wings. I watched the world outside my window, but it felt unreachable. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know how. The darkness inside me grew. I wanted to tell someone, but the words never came. I felt ashamed of my situation. I thought I was alone in my suffering. I didn't know that others had faced their own battles. I thought I was the only one carrying this weight. In those moments of despair, I held on to the memories of my parents' love. They had always believed in my talent. I clung to those memories like a lifeline. I wanted to honor their support by finding my voice again. I wanted to paint again. But the fear of my uncle kept me silent. I wanted to escape his grasp, but I didn't know how. I felt trapped in a cycle of pain and confusion. I needed someone to believe in me again. I wanted to find my way back to the girl who dreamed of being an artist. As the days turned into years, I realized that I had to change. I had to find a way to break free. I had to reclaim my dreams. I didn't know how, but I felt a flicker of hope. It was time to stand up for myself. It was time to let my voice be heard again. My life took a sudden turn when my father lost his job. I still remember the day it happened. I came home from school, excited to share my newest drawing. But the look on my parents' faces told me something was wrong. My father sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. My mother tried to comfort him, but I could see the worry in her eyes. The atmosphere in our home changed. We struggled to pay bills. My parents fought about money, and the tension grew. I felt helpless. My art started to fade into the background. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know how. The dreams I once held so close felt farther away than ever. Then, my uncle moved in with us. At first, I thought he would help. He was charming and funny. He told stories that made us laugh. I hoped his presence would lighten our burden. But it didn't take long for things to change. My uncle had a darkness that I could not see at first. As time passed, his behavior became unsettling. He would linger too long in my space. He made comments that felt inappropriate. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to express it. I wanted to trust him, but I felt confused. He was family, after all. I thought I should feel safe around him. It started with subtle actions. He would brush my shoulder or stand too close. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just my imagination. But my instincts told me something was wrong. I felt trapped, like a puppet on a string, unable to break free. One evening, while I worked on a painting, my uncle came into my room. I was lost in my colors, but his presence made me uneasy. He sat on my bed and watched me. I felt exposed under his gaze. I wished he would leave, but I didn't want to be rude. I forced a smile and continued painting. Then, he made a comment about my artwork. He praised my talent, but his tone felt off. It was too intense, too personal. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to push him away, but I didn't know how. I was just a child, and he was an adult. I felt powerless. As the days turned into weeks, the abuse began. It started with small touches that made my skin crawl. I felt sick but stayed silent. I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. I thought no one would believe me. I felt isolated, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I kept my art hidden. I wanted to protect it from the darkness in my life. I painted in secret, pouring my feelings onto the canvas. It was my only escape. But as my uncle's actions grew worse, I found it harder to create. The joy of painting faded. I felt like I was losing myself. I wanted to tell someone, but fear held me back. I thought about my parents and how they would react. I didn't want to burden them with my pain. They had enough to worry about. I felt alone in my suffering, carrying a weight that was too heavy to bear. As the abuse continued, I felt my dreams slipping away. I stopped entering art competitions. I stopped sharing my work. I felt like a ghost in my own life. The vibrant colors I once loved turned into shades of gray. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. My best friend, Lily, sensed something was wrong. She would ask me about my drawings, but I would brush her off. I didn't want her to see my pain. I didn't want to drag her into my nightmare. I felt ashamed and scared. I thought I was the only one suffering. I tried to hold on to my memories of Michael. I wondered if he would still believe in me. I missed the days when we dreamed together. I wanted to tell him everything, but I was too afraid. I felt trapped in a cage of silence, unable to reach out for help. As my uncle's behavior escalated, I knew I had to do something. I reached a breaking point. I was tired of being afraid. I was tired of feeling trapped. I wanted to reclaim my voice. I wanted to break free from the darkness that was consuming me. I remember the night it all became too much. I was in my room, painting, when my uncle entered without knocking. I felt a surge of panic. He approached me, his eyes filled with an intensity that scared me. I took a step back, but he grabbed my arm. I felt a rush of fear and anger. I knew I had to confront him. In that moment, I found my voice. I told him to stop. I demanded he leave my room. I was shaking, but I stood my ground. For the first time, I felt a flicker of power. I felt like I was breaking free from the chains that had held me for so long. But he laughed. He dismissed me as if my words meant nothing. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream, but I felt small. I realized that standing up to him would not be easy. I needed a plan. I needed to find a way to escape his grasp. After that night, I started to think about who I could trust. I remembered my teacher at school. She always encouraged my art. I thought about confiding in her. But fear held me back. What if she didn't believe me? What if it made things worse? But I knew I had to try. I needed to find a way to break the silence. I needed to reclaim my life. I wanted to heal and find my voice again. I wanted to paint my truth and tell my story. It was time to take the first step toward freedom. For years, I lived in silence. The abuse had a deep impact on me. I felt trapped in a dark world, far away from the dreams I once had. My love for art faded, and so did my spirit. I felt isolated, shameful, and scared. I wanted to tell someone, but fear held me back. I tried to keep a normal life. I went to school and acted like everything was okay. But inside, I felt like I was breaking. I would sit in class, staring at my empty notebook. I wanted to draw, but the images in my mind were clouded by pain. I felt alone, like I was in a glass box, watching life go by. I had a best friend named Lily. She was a bright light in my life. She always tried to cheer me up. She would ask me about my drawings. I wanted to share my art with her, but I couldn't. I felt too ashamed. I wanted her to see the real me, but I was too scared to let her in. Lily sensed something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was. I could see the concern in her eyes. She would ask me if I was okay, and I would smile and say yes. I wanted to protect her from my pain. I didn't want to burden her with my secrets. As time went on, my uncle's abuse became more frequent. I felt like I was drowning. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know how. I felt trapped in a cage, with no way out. My dreams of becoming an artist slipped farther away. I thought I would never find my voice again. There were days when I felt hopeless. I would sit alone in my room, painting in secret. I poured my feelings onto the canvas, trying to escape my reality. But with each stroke, I felt more lost. The colors that once brought me joy now felt dull and lifeless. One night, after a particularly difficult day, I broke down. I was sitting on my bed, holding my paintbrush. Tears streamed down my face. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was cry. I was tired of living in fear. I wanted to be free. In that moment of despair, I remembered my teacher, Mrs. Anderson. She always encouraged me to follow my dreams. She believed in my talent. I thought about how supportive she was. I realized that I needed to share my story with her. I needed to find my voice. The next day at school, I felt nervous. My heart raced as I walked into Mrs. Anderson's classroom. I wanted to tell her everything, but fear held me back. I sat at my desk, my hands shaking. I stared at the blank page in front of me. I felt like I was about to explode. When the bell rang, I gathered my courage. I approached Mrs. Anderson after class. She was grading papers, but she looked up and smiled at me. I felt a warmth in her gaze. It made me feel safe. I took a deep breath and told her I needed to talk. She noticed my distress and led me to a quiet corner of the classroom. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to spill everything, but the words wouldn't come. I hesitated, unsure of how to begin. But I knew I had to try. Eventually, the words started to flow. I told her about my uncle and the pain I had been carrying. As I spoke, I felt a mix of fear and relief. I could see the concern in her eyes. She listened intently, giving me her full attention. It felt good to finally share my burden. At first, she seemed shocked. I could tell she was processing what I was saying. Then, she reached out and held my hand. She told me that I was brave for speaking out. Her kindness gave me strength. I didn't feel as alone anymore. Mrs. Anderson took my situation seriously. She guided me through the process of reporting my uncle. It was hard, and I felt scared about what would happen next. But she assured me that I was doing the right thing. I felt a glimmer of hope as I realized that I was not alone. I remember the day I reported my uncle. I was filled with anxiety. I felt like I was walking into a storm. But Mrs. Anderson stood by my side. She held my hand as I spoke to the authorities. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as I finally told my truth. The aftermath was overwhelming. I faced many questions and emotions. It was hard to process everything that had happened. I felt a mix of relief and fear. My uncle was arrested, and I knew I had taken a step toward freedom. But I also worried about what would come next. In the following weeks, I started therapy. It was a new experience for me. I learned to express my feelings and confront my past. It was not easy, but I was determined to heal. I wanted to reclaim my identity and my love for art. Therapy helped me begin to understand my emotions. I realized that I had been carrying the weight of shame for too long. I started to see that the abuse was not my fault. I began to find my voice again. I also started to paint again. It was a slow process, but I felt a spark of creativity returning. I poured my feelings onto the canvas, expressing my pain and my journey. It was freeing to create again. I felt like I was slowly coming back to life. As I continued to heal, I found support in unexpected places. I met others who had faced similar struggles. We shared our stories and supported one another. It felt good to connect with people who understood my pain. I no longer felt alone. Through therapy and support, I began to rebuild my dreams. I started to focus on my art again. I wanted to tell my story through my paintings. I wanted to show the world that I was still here, and I would not be silenced. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it. I had found my voice, and I was determined to reclaim my life. My art became a powerful tool for healing and self-expression. I was ready to rise from the ashes and show the world the real Clara. The days after I reported my uncle were filled with a mix of emotions. I felt relief, but I also felt a heavy weight on my heart. I had taken a brave step, but the fear of what would happen next lingered. I was scared of the unknown. I had opened a door, and I didn't know where it would lead. At first, I struggled with the aftermath. I felt vulnerable. I worried about what my uncle would do. I feared he would retaliate. I tried to push those thoughts away, but they crept in at night when I lay in bed. I wanted to feel safe, but I didn't know how. I remember one night, sitting on my bed, staring at my paints. I wanted to create, but the fear held me back. I felt like I was in a fog. The colors that once inspired me felt dull and lifeless. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know how. I felt lost again. But then I remembered the support I had. Mrs. Anderson had been there for me. She encouraged me to express my feelings through art. I picked up my brush and started painting. I poured my fears, my pain, and my hopes onto the canvas. It felt freeing to let it all out. As I painted, I felt a flicker of strength returning. I was no longer the scared girl hiding in the shadows. I was reclaiming my voice. I painted images of light breaking through darkness, symbolizing my journey. I wanted to show the world that I was still here, fighting to heal. One day, I received a call from the authorities. They wanted me to come in for a meeting. My heart raced as I prepared for the worst. I knew they would discuss my uncle and the next steps in the case. I felt anxious and unsure. But I also felt a sense of determination. I had to face this. When I arrived, I was greeted by a kind officer. They explained the process and what to expect. I felt nervous, but the officer's calm demeanor helped ease my fears. I knew I had to be strong. I was ready to stand up for myself. During the meeting, I shared my story again. I spoke about the abuse and how it had affected my life. It was hard to relive those moments, but I felt empowered. I was no longer a victim, I was a survivor. I was taking control of my narrative. After the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I had faced my fears, and I had spoken my truth. I wanted to celebrate, but I also knew the journey was far from over. I still had a long way to go, but I felt hopeful. As the weeks passed, I continued to attend therapy. It became a safe space for me to express my feelings. I learned coping techniques to deal with my anxiety and fear. I started to understand that healing takes time. It is not a straight path, it has ups and downs. I also reconnected with my art. I began to create pieces that reflected my journey. I painted my emotions, capturing the highs and lows. I found comfort in the process. Each stroke of the brush was a step toward healing. I felt empowered as I shared my work with others. One day, I decided to enter an art competition. It was a big step for me. I felt nervous, but I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to show the world that I was still here, that I could rise above my past. I chose to create a piece that represented my journey from darkness to light. The day of the competition arrived. I felt a mix of excitement and fear. As I stood in front of my painting, I felt proud. It was a depiction of a sunrise breaking through dark clouds. It symbolized hope and new beginnings. I wanted to inspire others who had faced their own battles. When the judges walked around, I held my breath. I was scared but determined. I wanted to share my story. I wanted others to see that healing is possible. I felt a sense of strength as I spoke about my art. I opened up about my journey. I couldn't believe I was standing there, sharing my truth. After the judges finished their rounds, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had faced my fears, and I had done my best. Regardless of the outcome, I felt proud of myself. I had taken a step toward reclaiming my life. A few days later, I received a call. I had won an award for my piece. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I felt joy and disbelief wash over me. I realized that my story mattered. I had transformed my pain into something beautiful. The award ceremony was a big moment for me. I stood in front of a crowd, holding my award. I shared my story with others. I talked about my journey and the importance of speaking out. I felt a sense of purpose. I wanted to inspire others to find their voice. In that moment, I felt empowered. I knew that I could help others who had faced similar struggles. I wanted to be a source of hope. I wanted my story to remind others that they are not alone. Healing is possible, no matter how dark the past may be. As I looked out at the audience, I felt a sense of connection. I realized that my journey was not just about me, it was about all of us. Together, we could support one another and rise above our pain. I was ready to embrace my new path and help others find their strength. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was determined. I had found my voice, and I was ready to use it. I wanted to continue painting and using my art to inspire change. I wanted to show the world that even after the darkest times, there is always hope for a brighter future. After winning the award, I felt a wave of hope. I had faced my fears, and it felt good to share my story. But I knew the journey was not over. I had to keep moving forward. I needed to confront my past and find closure. One day, I was sitting in my room, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about my uncle and the pain he caused. I felt anger rising within me. I wanted to scream, to let it all out. But I also felt a sense of determination. I knew I had to face him, but I didn't know how. I decided to talk to Mrs. Anderson again. She had been my rock throughout this journey. I wanted her guidance as I navigated this difficult path. I approached her after class and asked if we could talk. She agreed, and we sat down together. I shared my feelings about my uncle. I told her I felt a mix of anger and fear. I wanted to confront him but didn't know how. Mrs. Anderson listened carefully, her eyes filled with understanding. She reminded me that I had already been so brave. I had taken the first step by speaking out. I could do this too. We talked about my options. Mrs. Anderson suggested I could write a letter to my uncle. It could help me express my feelings without facing him directly. I thought it was a good idea. Writing had always been a way for me to process my emotions. That night, I sat at my desk with a notebook. I took a deep breath and began to write. I wrote about the pain he caused and how it affected my life. I poured my heart onto the page. With each word, I felt a weight lifting. I was reclaiming my voice. In the letter, I wrote about my journey of healing. I told him how I had found strength through art. I wanted him to understand the impact of his actions. I wanted him to know that I was no longer the scared girl he once controlled. I was a survivor. When I finished the letter, I felt a sense of relief. I had expressed my feelings, and it felt powerful. I decided to give the letter to my lawyer, who would deliver it to him. I knew it was a step toward closure. I felt a mix of fear and excitement. After sending the letter, I waited for a response. I felt anxious, unsure of what would happen next. But I also felt empowered. I had taken control of my story. I had faced my fears, and I was ready for whatever came next. A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer. My uncle had read the letter, and he wanted to meet. My heart raced. I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to face him. I wanted to show him that I was no longer afraid. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. As the day approached, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I practiced what I wanted to say. I wanted to confront him but also express how I had grown. I wanted him to see that I was no longer a victim. When the day finally arrived, I walked into the meeting room with my lawyer by my side. My uncle sat across from me, and I felt a surge of anxiety. But I reminded myself that I was strong. I had come too far to turn back now. As I looked at him, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told him how his actions had affected my life. I spoke about the years of pain and fear. I wanted him to understand the depth of his impact. He sat there, silent, as I poured out my heart. I could see the discomfort on his face, but I didn't care. I was finally standing up for myself. I wanted him to know that I had found my voice. After I finished speaking, I felt a wave of relief. I had confronted him, and it felt powerful. My lawyer asked him questions about his actions and the consequences. I listened as my uncle tried to explain himself, but his words fell flat. I felt no sympathy for him. The meeting ended, and I walked out feeling lighter. I had faced my fears, and I felt a sense of closure. I was no longer defined by my past. I was ready to embrace my future. In the following weeks, I continued to focus on my healing journey. I attended therapy regularly and continued to paint. My art became a powerful outlet for my emotions. I created pieces that represented my growth and resilience. I also began to share my story with others. I started speaking at local support groups for survivors of abuse. I wanted to let others know they were not alone. I wanted to inspire hope and healing. Each time I spoke, I felt more empowered. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a larger event. It was a gathering for survivors of abuse and advocates for change. I felt nervous but excited. I knew this was an opportunity to reach even more people. On the day of the event, I stood in front of a crowd, my heart racing. I took a deep breath and began to share my story. I spoke about my journey, the pain I faced, and the strength I found in healing. I saw tears in the audience, and I felt connected to them. As I finished my speech, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I had transformed my pain into a message of hope. I wanted others to know that they could find their voice too. I wanted to remind them that they were not alone. After the event, many people approached me to share their stories. I felt honored to be part of their journey. I realized that healing is not a solitary path. We can support one another and rise together. I knew I had come a long way. I was no longer the scared girl hiding in the shadows. I had found my voice, and I was ready to use it. I was determined to continue sharing my story and helping others find their strength. As I looked ahead, I felt hopeful. I knew the road would still have challenges, but I was ready to face them. I had transformed my pain into purpose. I was Clara, a survivor, and I would continue to rise. After confronting my uncle, I felt a sense of relief. But I knew that healing was a journey, not a destination. I needed to continue working on myself. I wanted to rebuild my life and find joy in my art again. I kept attending therapy sessions. My therapist, Sarah, helped me navigate my feelings. She encouraged me to explore my past and how it shaped me. I learned that it was okay to feel pain, but I didn't have to let it define me. I began to understand that healing took time, and that was all right. One day, Sarah suggested I try a new approach. She encouraged me to create a vision board. It would be a visual representation of my dreams and goals. I loved the idea. I wanted to focus on what I wanted to achieve, rather than what I had lost. That weekend, I gathered magazines and art supplies. I cut out images and words that inspired me. I found pictures of beautiful landscapes, art supplies, and phrases like "believe in yourself" and "embrace your journey." As I created my vision board, I felt excited. I was reminding myself of the woman I wanted to become. When I finished, I hung the board on my wall. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sense of purpose. It was a daily reminder of my goals. I wanted to create art that inspired others. I wanted to help those who had faced similar struggles. I also wanted to travel and see the world. With my vision board as motivation, I started to paint more. I found a new energy in my art. I began to explore different styles and techniques. I painted my feelings, my dreams, and my journey. Each piece became a piece of my soul. I decided to participate in a local art show. It felt like a big step, but I was ready. I wanted to share my work with others. I wanted my art to tell my story. I wanted to inspire people to find hope in their own journeys. The night of the art show arrived. I felt nervous but excited. I set up my pieces, and as people began to arrive, I felt a rush of emotions. I watched as attendees admired my work. I felt proud of what I had created. Each painting represented a part of my journey. As the night went on, I spoke with many visitors. I shared my story and the meaning behind my art. I could see the connection in their eyes. Some people even shared their own stories with me. I felt a sense of community forming. We were all connected by our struggles and our hope for healing. At one point, a woman approached me. She looked at one of my paintings, a piece that represented my journey from darkness to light. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke. She told me that my artwork resonated with her. She shared her own story of abuse and healing. I felt honored that my art could touch someone so deeply. That moment reminded me of why I wanted to share my story in the first place. I wanted to show others that they were not alone. I wanted to create a safe space for people to open up about their own experiences. I wanted to inspire change and healing. As the night came to a close, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I had taken a big step in my journey. I had shared my art and my story. I had connected with others who understood my pain. I realized that I was not just an artist, I was a beacon of hope for those who needed it. In the weeks that followed, I continued to focus on my healing. I attended support groups for survivors of abuse. I met many incredible people who shared their stories. Together, we offered support and encouragement. I felt empowered to help others find their voice. I also started volunteering at a local organization that supported survivors. I wanted to give back and help others who were struggling. I felt a sense of purpose in my work. It was fulfilling to know that I was making a difference. Through these experiences, I found new friendships. I connected with people who understood my journey. We shared laughter and tears. We supported one another as we navigated our healing paths. I felt grateful for the community I had found. One day, while volunteering, I met a young girl named Mia. She was shy but had a sparkle in her eye. I could see that she loved art. I decided to mentor her. I wanted to encourage her creativity and help her find her voice. We started an art club together. Each week, we would meet and create together. I watched as Mia blossomed. She began to express her feelings through her art. I felt proud to be part of her journey. I wanted to show her that she could be strong and confident, just like I was learning to be. As I continued to mentor Mia, I realized that healing is not just about oneself. It's also about helping others. I felt fulfilled knowing that I could make a positive impact on someone's life. I wanted to be a source of hope for those who needed guidance. Through my journey, I learned the importance of resilience. I learned that life is full of challenges, but we have the strength to overcome them. I knew that my past would always be a part of me, but it would not define my future. I was ready to embrace the life I had built. In time, I began to dream even bigger. I wanted to hold workshops for survivors. I wanted to share my story and help others find their healing through art. I wanted to create a space where people could express themselves freely. I started planning my first workshop. I felt nervous but excited. I wanted to create a warm and welcoming environment. I wanted participants to feel safe sharing their stories. I wanted to show them that they could heal through creativity. As the date approached, I felt a mix of fear and hope. I knew that this was another step in my journey. I was ready to share my experiences and inspire others. I was ready to help them find their strength through art. I was Clara, a survivor, and I was ready to rise. The day of my first workshop finally arrived. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I wanted everything to be perfect. I had prepared activities that would help participants express themselves through art. I wanted to create a safe space for everyone to share their stories and heal together. I arrived early to set up the room. I decorated the walls with colorful art supplies and encouraging quotes. I wanted the atmosphere to feel welcoming. I arranged tables with paints, brushes, and canvases. I hoped the bright colors would inspire creativity. As people began to arrive, I felt my heart race. I greeted each person with a smile. I wanted them to feel comfortable. Some looked nervous, while others seemed eager. I could see that we were all there for the same reason, to heal and express ourselves. Once everyone settled in, I introduced myself. I shared my story of overcoming abuse and finding my voice through art. I could see the participants listening intently. I hoped my journey would inspire them. I wanted them to know they were not alone. We started with a warm-up activity. I encouraged everyone to draw something that represented their feelings. I wanted them to let go of their fears and just create. As I walked around the room, I saw a mix of expressions. Some people smiled while others looked pensive. It was a powerful moment. After the warm-up, I invited everyone to share their drawings if they felt comfortable. One woman named Sarah stood up and showed her artwork. She had drawn a stormy sky with a small sun peeking through the clouds. She explained how she felt trapped in darkness but still held on to hope. I felt moved by her vulnerability. As others began to share, I noticed a shift in the room. Participants opened up about their struggles and pain. There was a sense of connection forming. We were all sharing our stories, and it felt powerful. I could see tears in some eyes, but there were also smiles of understanding. I encouraged everyone to keep creating. I wanted them to express their emotions through their art. I walked around, offering support and guidance. I felt grateful to be part of this journey with them. I saw how art helped us connect and heal together. One participant, a young woman named Emily, seemed shy at first. But as she painted, I could see her confidence growing. She shared that she had always loved art but had lost her passion after a difficult experience. I encouraged her to let her creativity flow. I wanted her to rediscover her love for art. As the workshop continued, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I watched as participants poured their hearts onto the canvas. Each piece told a story. It was beautiful to witness the healing power of art in action. I felt proud to be part of this experience. During a break, I gathered everyone for a group discussion. I wanted to create a safe space for sharing their thoughts. I encouraged them to talk about their experiences and how art helped them. The room filled with laughter and tears as stories were shared. Emily spoke up, thanking everyone for their support. She shared how she felt inspired to create again. It warmed my heart to see her transformation. I felt proud of everyone for opening up and embracing their emotions. We were all growing together. As the workshop came to an end, I invited participants to display their artwork. I wanted everyone to see how far they had come. We created a small gallery on the walls, showcasing our pieces. It felt like a celebration of our journeys. I asked everyone to take a moment to reflect on what they had learned. I encouraged them to think about their next steps in healing. I wanted them to leave feeling empowered and inspired. We had created something beautiful together. As we gathered for a closing circle, I thanked everyone for their courage and vulnerability. I told them how proud I was of each of them. We had formed a special bond through our shared experiences. I hoped they would continue to support one another beyond this workshop. Before everyone left, I handed out small notebooks. I encouraged them to keep writing and drawing their feelings. I wanted them to carry the spirit of the workshop with them. I hoped they would continue to express themselves and find strength in their creativity. As I watched everyone leave, I felt a deep sense of joy. I had created a space for healing and connection. I had witnessed the power of art to transform lives. I knew that this was just the beginning of my journey as a mentor. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from the participants. They shared updates about their artistic journeys and how the workshop impacted them. I felt a sense of pride knowing that I had made a difference in their lives. It encouraged me to continue my work. I also continued to create my own art. I poured my feelings onto the canvas, reflecting on my journey. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wanted to keep sharing my story and inspiring others. My art became a way to amplify the voices of those who felt silenced. I began planning more workshops, eager to help others find their voice through art. I wanted to reach as many people as possible. I wanted to create a community of support and healing, where everyone felt safe to express themselves. Through this journey, I learned that healing is a lifelong process. It is not always easy, but it is worth it. I discovered that sharing our stories can bring us closer together. I felt grateful for the opportunity to help others find their strength. As I continued to paint and mentor, I felt empowered. I knew I was creating a legacy of hope and resilience. I was Clara, a survivor, and I was dedicated to helping others rise alongside me. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace it all. As I continued my journey of healing and mentoring, I felt a sense of purpose. I had built a community of support through my workshops. I was proud of the connections we had formed. But I also knew that my past could catch up with me at any moment. One afternoon, while I was at an art supply store gathering materials for my next workshop, I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Michael, my first love. I hadn't seen him in years. My heart raced as memories flooded back. The good ones and the painful ones. He looked different but still had that warm smile. I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I remembered the dreams we shared and how we had lost touch. I wanted to run to him, but I was also scared. I wondered what he would think of me now. Would he see me as a survivor or just a victim of my past? Michael approached me cautiously. He smiled and said hello. I could see the surprise in his eyes. It felt like a moment frozen in time. I wanted to tell him everything that had happened, but words escaped me. Instead, we exchanged small talk. It was nice to see him, but I felt like I was holding back. As we talked, I noticed he seemed genuinely interested in my life. I shared how I had been working with survivors and how art had helped me heal. I felt proud to share my journey. I wanted him to see how far I had come. After a few minutes, I decided to take a leap of faith. I told him about my workshops and how they had impacted others. I explained how art could be a powerful tool for healing. I felt a sense of empowerment as I spoke. I wanted him to understand my passion. To my surprise, Michael listened intently. He asked questions and seemed genuinely interested. I could see that he cared. It felt good to share my story with someone who had known me before the darkness. It felt like a piece of my past was reconnecting with my present. As we talked, I felt a sense of comfort. I realized that I had grown as a person. I was no longer the scared girl I once was. I was a strong woman who had faced her demons. I felt proud of my journey, and I wanted Michael to see that. Eventually, our conversation shifted to the past. I hesitated but decided to be honest. I told him how I had struggled after he left. I shared the pain of losing my dreams and how I had to fight to find my voice again. I could see concern in his eyes. He seemed shocked by what I had been through. Michael took a deep breath and spoke softly. He told me he had always cared about me. He apologized for not being there when I needed support. He had no idea about the struggles I faced. I could see the regret in his eyes, but I also felt compassion for him. We both had our own battles. In that moment, I felt a mix of emotions. I wanted to forgive him, but part of me still felt hurt. I realized that healing involves understanding and compassion, not just for myself but for others too. I could see that he had grown as well. As we continued to talk, I felt a sense of closure. I didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. I could forgive him, not for him, but for me. It was time to let go of the pain and embrace the future. I wanted to move forward, not be anchored by old wounds. Before we parted ways, I invited Michael to one of my upcoming workshops. I wanted him to see the community I had built. I wanted him to witness the healing power of art. He agreed, and I felt a sense of excitement. It felt good to reconnect. The day of the workshop arrived, and I felt nervous about having Michael there. I wanted him to see the new me. I wanted him to understand the journey I had taken. As he walked into the room, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. When I saw him, I smiled and waved. I introduced him to the participants. I could feel their curiosity. I explained that he was an old friend who had come to support our journey. I wanted to create an atmosphere of openness and acceptance. Throughout the workshop, I felt empowered to share my story again. I wanted to show everyone that healing is a continuous process. I talked about forgiveness and letting go of the past. I wanted to inspire others to embrace their journey, just as I had. As we painted, I noticed Michael observing the participants. He seemed moved by their stories and their courage. I felt proud to share this experience with him. I hoped he would see the strength of our community and the healing that could take place through art. At one point, I invited Michael to speak, hoping he would share his thoughts. He looked nervous but agreed. As he spoke, I could see the sincerity in his words. He talked about the importance of supporting one another and the power of healing. It was a beautiful moment. After the workshop, many participants approached Michael, thanking him for sharing. I could see the impact he had on them. It felt good to witness this connection. I realized that healing is not just about individual journeys, it's also about coming together as a community. As the day came to a close, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I had faced my past, and I had allowed someone from it to witness my growth. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I knew I was on the right path. As I said goodbye to Michael, I felt a mix of emotions. I was grateful for our reconnection, and I was proud of how far I had come. I knew that our past would always be a part of me, but it wouldn't define my future. Driving home that day, I felt a sense of peace. I had confronted my past and found closure. I had learned that healing is a journey filled with ups and downs. It's about forgiveness, understanding, and embracing growth. I was Clara, a survivor, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. My story was still being written, and I felt excited about the chapters yet to unfold. I was determined to keep sharing my journey and inspiring others to rise alongside me. As I reflected on my journey, I felt grateful for the path I had traveled. I had faced many challenges, but I had emerged stronger. I had transformed my pain into purpose, and I wanted to inspire others to do the same. I believed in the power of hope and the possibility of healing. In the months following my reconnection with Michael, I continued to lead workshops. I focused on helping survivors find their voices through art. Each workshop became a safe space for sharing stories and expressing emotions. I felt fulfilled knowing that I was making a difference in people's lives. One day, I received a message from a local community center. They wanted to partner with me to offer art therapy sessions for survivors of abuse. I was thrilled. This was an opportunity to reach even more people and provide a support system through creativity. I met with the director of the center to discuss the details. We talked about how art could help individuals express their feelings and begin the healing process. I felt a sense of excitement as we planned the sessions. I knew this was the next step in my mission to help others. As I prepared for the sessions, I began to think about my own legacy. I wanted to create something that would continue to inspire people long after I was gone. I decided to write a book about my journey. I wanted to share my story in a way that could reach those who might not attend a workshop. Writing the book was a cathartic experience. I poured my heart onto the pages, recounting my struggles, triumphs, and the lessons I had learned along the way. I wanted to remind readers that they are not alone and that healing is possible. I wanted them to know that they can rise above their pasts. Once I finished the manuscript, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was proud of what I had created. I found a publisher who believed in my story, and soon my book was set to be released. I felt nervous but excited. I wanted to share my message with the world. As the book launch approached, I planned an event at the community center. I wanted it to be a celebration of healing and hope. I invited participants from my workshops and anyone in the community who wanted to join. It felt important to create a space for togetherness. On the day of the launch, I was filled with anticipation. The room was decorated with my artwork, and I had set up a table with copies of my book. I felt a mix of nerves and excitement as people began to arrive. I greeted everyone with a warm smile, grateful for their presence. As I spoke about my journey, I could see the audience connecting with my story. I shared my struggles and the power of art in my healing process. I wanted them to understand that they too could find strength and hope. I wanted to inspire them to believe in their own worth. After my speech, I opened the floor for questions. I encouraged participants to share their experiences. Many people spoke about their own journeys of healing. I felt a sense of community forming. We were all there to support one another, and it felt beautiful. One woman, Lisa, stood up and shared her story. She spoke about how she had been silenced for years, but my book gave her the courage to speak out. I felt moved by her words. I realized that my story had made a difference. I was honored to be part of her journey. As the evening continued, I signed copies of my book for those who wanted one. It felt surreal to see people holding my story in their hands. I wanted them to know that they were not alone, and that healing was possible. I felt grateful for the connections we were building. As the event came to a close, I reflected on how far I had come. I had transformed my pain into a message of hope. I had created a community of support and healing. I felt empowered knowing that I was making a difference in people's lives. In the months that followed, I continued to lead art therapy sessions at the community center. I witnessed incredible transformations in participants. They began to find their voices and express their emotions through art. I felt proud to be a part of their journeys. One day, as I was cleaning up after a session, I received a message from a woman who had attended my workshop. She told me that she had started painting again after years of feeling lost. It warmed my heart to hear that my work had inspired her. I realized that this was the impact I had hoped to make. Through my workshops, I met many survivors who inspired me. Their courage motivated me to keep pushing forward. I knew that together, we were creating a ripple effect of healing. I wanted to remind everyone that they could reclaim their lives, no matter how dark their past had been. As I looked ahead, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wanted to continue mentoring and supporting survivors. I envisioned expanding my workshops to reach even more people. I wanted to create a movement of hope, where everyone could find their voice and express themselves. I also began to think about larger art projects. I wanted to create a mural that represented healing and resilience. I envisioned bringing together artists and survivors to collaborate on this project. I wanted it to be a powerful symbol of our journeys. In the end, I realized that my story was not just my own. It was a collective story of survival and strength. I was Clara, a survivor who had risen above her past. I felt grateful for the opportunities to inspire others and create lasting change. My journey was ongoing, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I wanted to continue sharing my message of hope, reminding everyone that they are worthy of love and healing. Together, we could rise and create a brighter future.